something quiet has been happening beneath the surface of modern life. And it is not announced with headlines. It arrives as a mood, a faint compression in the chest when you open a dating app and realize you are not excited, only braced. A slight delay before you reply to a message, not because you are busy, but because you are trying to calculate what the right amount of interest looks like. The strange sensation of living in a marketplace where your sincerity feels like a liability, where one misstep becomes a story you cannot control, where a single woman's shifting temperature can rearrange your whole week. You can tell when a man's life has started to turn against him by how he moves through small moments. He checks his phone in the elevator, then again when he steps into the hallway, then again before he opens his door, as if the device is not a tool but an oracle. He begins to speak faster around women he desires, as if speed will prevent judgment. He laughs a little too early, nods a little too often, and over-explains what does not need defending. He starts offering his peace like a currency, spending it in advance, hoping to buy security. It often starts with a misunderstanding he does not even realize he is participating in. That intensity is proof of value. That pursuit is masculine. That sacrifice is romantic. That self-erasure is devotion. He believes the more he gives, the more he will be respected. But the more he gives, the more he is tested. Not because women are cruel, because nature is diagnostic. Instinct is not sentimental. It reads structures, it senses whether a man is governed from within or governed by what he wants from outside. I have watched this play out in men who are intelligent, capable, disciplined at work, yet strangely powerless in love. In the office they lead meetings, in the gym they lift, in public they appear composed. But then a woman enters their inner world and the architecture collapses. Their schedule becomes negotiable. Their boundaries become flexible. Their standards become understanding. Their humor becomes an apology. Their voices become softer. Their attention becomes a leash they willingly hand over. And in the silence after she pulls away, they cannot even name what they lost, only that they feel smaller. You might already know the feeling, the late-night scrolling that replaces sleep because you are waiting for a message that may never arrive. The self-talk tends to sound like a lawyer defending your own humiliation. The moment you catch yourself rehearsing a conversation in the shower, not to speak the truth, but to manage her reaction. The tiny humiliations, changing your plans because she might be free, paying for things you do not want to pay for, tolerating disrespect you would never accept from a stranger, calling it patience, because the alternative would be to face your own needs. Aristotle understood this long before we had modern words for it. Not with dating apps, not with social media, not with the attention economy, but with something older and sharper, the mechanics of character. The way a man's repeated choices become his identity, the way excess and deficiency both destroy what they claim to protect. The way to balance is not a soft compromise, but a disciplined mastery. By the end of this, you will understand precisely why imbalance quietly kills long-term respect and what it dismantles in you if you keep confusing devotion with self-abandonment. Aristotle lived in a world that did not flatter weakness. He was born into a culture where virtue was not a slogan but a survival technology. Men were measured by steadiness under pressure, by clarity of purpose, by the ability to govern themselves when the world offered temptation, fear, and applause. He studied not merely what people claimed to value, but what they actually did when desire and discomfort arrived. He watched men in the marketplace, in the household, in politics, men who tried to purchase loyalty with gifts, men who wanted to win admiration with performance, men who surrendered their principles for proximity to pleasure. He saw the same pattern you see today, only with different costumes. He called his central discipline the doctrine of the mean, not mediocrity, not passivity, but the precise calibration between too much and too little. Courage is not recklessness and not cowardice. It is the exact capacity to face what must be faced. Generosity is not waste and not stinginess. It is the measured giving that remains sovereign. Pride, proper pride, is not vanity and not self-contempt. It is the accurate recognition of one's worth and the refusal to beg for validation. Aristotle's world did not ask whether a man felt worthy. It asked whether he behaved in a way that made it inevitable. Here is the thesis that will hold the entire script together like steel inside stone. A man who cannot maintain balance in his desire will eventually lose the respect he is trying to secure. Not because women are evil, not because love is a trap, because respect is a response to structure and imbalance is structural weakness. When you overinvest, You announce that your life has no center strong enough to resist the pull. When you underinvest, you announce that you are incapable of attachment, incapable of duty, incapable of building. Both extremes rot the foundation. Both extremes teach the other person how to treat you. Aristotle would say that we become what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not a single act, it is a habit. And the brutal implication for modern male-female dynamics is this: if you repeatedly practice emotional kneeling, you become a kneeling man. If you repeatedly practice chasing, you become a chaser. If you repeatedly practice self-betrayal for affection, you become a man who is only himself when alone. And a man who is only himself when alone cannot be respected, because respect requires a stable object. Look at the modern scenarios that prove it without needing ideology. A man meets a woman and feels the surge, the chemical certainty that this is special. He texts quickly, responds instantly, and offers availability like tribute. At first, she enjoyed it. She feels desired. But soon she becomes uneasy, not because she dislikes him, but because she senses the imbalance. His attention is not a gift, it is a demand disguised as devotion. It asks her to be responsible for his mood. It makes her feel powerful in a way that feels unsafe. And safety is not romance. Safety is structure. Another man meets a woman and plays the opposite extreme. He withholds, he delays, he performs indifference as a strategy. He treats the relationship like a chessboard, never allowing warmth to emerge fully. She may chase for a while. Many women will test coldness because scarcity creates intrigue, but over time, she cannot respect it either because it reveals deficiency, an inability to stand in honest desire without losing control. A man who cannot say calmly, "I want you," without collapsing into need or hiding behind games is not balanced. He is fearful, and fear is visible. In long-term relationships, imbalance becomes even more lethal. One man gives and gives until he becomes invisible. He pays bills, fixes problems, absorbs moods, avoids conflict, apologizes first, and slowly teaches his partner that his boundaries are theoretical. He becomes the household's emotional employee, always on call, never sovereign. The woman may not consciously choose disrespect. It grows like mold in the corners of a structure that is never repaired. Another man takes and takes. He demands submission without providing stability, demands loyalty without offering leadership, and demands softness while living in chaos. She may stay, but her respect becomes brittle. In both cases, the relationship becomes a theater of imbalance, one person swollen with power, the other drained of self. Aristotle's insight is that virtue is always a form of measured strength. It is not the absence of desire. It is desire governed by reason and character. He wrote that the virtuous man finds pleasure in what is good, not in what is merely sweet. That line matters in modern dating more than men realize, because the sweet is immediate: attention, validation, sex, novelty, conquest, the rush of being chosen. The good is slower: mutual respect, shared direction, stable intimacy, the quiet pride of a man who is not owned by his cravings. And Aristotle also understood the difference between being liked and being respected. Respect is not a mood you inspire, it is a recognition of your inner law. A woman can enjoy a man who is entertaining, beautiful, generous, and agreeable. But respect arrives when she encounters a man who will not betray himself to keep her. Aristotle gives use a sentence that modern men should carry like a blade. Self-control is a kind of freedom, not freedom from women, freedom from being governed by the part of you that panics when affection is uncertain. Because what is really happening beneath the surface of modern male-female dynamics is not a war between sexes. It is a war inside the male psyche between hunger and governance, between the part of you that wants to be consumed by desire and the part of you that can remain upright while wanting something intensely. Most men think the collapse is her fault, her mixed signals, her options, her coldness, her tests. But Aristotle would insist you look at the deeper mechanism, your relationship to excess and deficiency, your inability to stand in the middle. The collapse begins quietly. Phase 1 is numbness in everyday life. You tell yourself, this is how it is now. You accept low investment from her because you have been trained to believe you must earn basic respect. You accept unpredictability as excitement. You accept anxiety as chemistry. Your nervous system becomes a marketplace. Every notification is a price movement. Every delay is a loss. Every smile is a gain. You do not call it an imbalance, you call it romance. Your body starts to reorganize around her. Sleep becomes lighter. Appetite changes. Work, focus fractures. You begin checking your phone not because you have time, but because you cannot tolerate uncertainty. And uncertainty is precisely what modern systems feed you. The algorithmic drip of attention, the promise of connection always just out of reach. But Aristotle would say the man who cannot tolerate uncertainty is easy to govern. By her, by the app, by the mood of the room, by any force that offers temporary relief. Then comes phase 2, justification. You begin negotiating against your own standards. You notice a small disrespect, a dismissive tone, a cancelled plan with no accountability, a flirtation kept visible like a warning, and you tell yourself, she didn't mean it, or she is busy, or women are complicated. But what you are really doing is buying time to avoid a painful choice. Either confront it and risk losing her, or accept it and lose yourself. Many men choose the second option because they think the cost is smaller. It is not. It is merely delayed. I once spoke to a man who described his relationship like a weather system. Some weeks it's warm, he said. Some weeks it's cold. I try not to be upset about it. Listen to the horror in that sentence. He was living as a farmer under a sky he could not control, praying for affection like rain. He thought he was being patient. He was practicing cowardice, not in the dramatic sense, but in the daily refusal to risk loss for the sake of truth. Aristotle would call this a failure of courage. Not battlefield courage, domestic courage, psychological courage. The courage to speak clearly, to set a boundary, to endure displeasure, to accept that a relationship that requires your self-erasure is not a relationship, it is a contract where your dignity is the payment. Then phase 3 arrives, self-abandonment. It is subtle at first. You begin over-texting, not with overt desperation, but with checking in, just making sure. Hope your day is going well. You craft messages like offerings. You wait for replies like verdicts. You reread your own words searching for mistakes. You start apologizing for things you do not believe you did wrong, because keeping her calm feels like survival. You change your schedule to align with hers, even when she does not. You begin to hide your honest opinions because you have learned that disagreement risks distance, and distance, to an imbalanced man, feels like death. Here is what you think is happening. You're proving your love, showing your devotion, becoming better for her. Here is what is really happening. You are training her nervous system to associate you with compliance, with predictability, with low costs. You are reducing your own perceived value by making yourself too available, too malleable, too eager to be chosen. Not because scarcity is magic, because a man with no center is not safe to build with. Women do not respect men who have no internal government. Even the kindest woman cannot respect a man who makes her his purpose, because it loads her with a burden she did not ask for, to be the sun in his solar system. At first, it felt flattering, then it feels suffocating. And then, inevitably, she tests the edges to see if there is any structure there at all. This is why men are confused when a woman says she wants vulnerability, but then withdraws when he collapses into emotional need. Vulnerability is not needed. Vulnerability is truth spoken from a stable spine. Need is truth spoken as a plea for rescue. The first inspires intimacy. The second inspires either pity or contempt, and both are poison. I work with men who are stunned by how quickly respect evaporates after they open up. They interpret it as female hypocrisy, but the more profound truth is that they opened up from deficiency, not from balance. They did not reveal their soul. They handed her their steering wheel. They placed their emotional stability on her lap and called it trust. Aristotle would say this is not virtue. It is dependent. Now consider the contrast, story, the man she later pursued. On the surface, he might not look radically different. He may have similar income, similar attractiveness, and similar education, but the difference is architectural. He does not reorganize his life around her moods. He makes plans and keeps them. He speaks with calm clarity even when she is displeased. He does not rush to explain himself when she is uncertain. He does not beg for reassurance. He is warm without being liquid. He is present without being owned. That balance is not a technique, it is a character. Aristotle would say the difference is habituation. One man practiced imbalance until imbalance became him. The other practiced steadiness until steadiness became him. And women, like all humans, respect what is consistent, what is governed. what is not easily moved by noise. But you cannot understand modern dynamics without widening the lens. The culture has changed the incentives, and many men are reacting to incentives without realizing it. Dating apps have turned initial connection into a kind of high-frequency trading. Attention is liquid, options are visible, comparison is constant. A man is no longer competing against one rival. He is competing against the entire catalogue of potential novelty available at the thumb's movement. Social media has turned relationships into public theatre. Public shaming has become a weapon. HR risk has made male initiative feel dangerous in workplaces. False accusation risk, even if statistically rare, lives as a psychological spectre because one public claim can destroy years of reputation. Divorce laws and custody realities make long-term commitment a high-stakes bet for many men, especially those who build wealth. The attention economy has trained everyone to expect stimulation and variety, and trained men to perform constantly, to be interesting, to be worth it, to be a product. This environment rewards extremes. It rewards men who either become clowns for approval or tyrants for control. It punishes the middle path because it is not dramatic. It does not trend. It does not go viral. Balance is quiet. Balance is almost invisible until you live near it and realize your nervous system can finally breathe. Aristotle would see this as a society drifting away from virtue and toward appetite. Not appetite for food or sex alone, but thirst for stimulation, for novelty, for emotional peaks. He would say that when pleasure becomes the aim, the soul becomes untrained, and an untrained soul is easy to manipulate. The man's confusion is not merely personal, it is structural. He is trying to build a stable household in a city designed to keep him distracted. He is trying to practice commitment in a marketplace designed to keep him browsing. He is trying to speak honestly in an era where any sentence can be clipped, reframed, and weaponized. He is trying to be masculine in a climate where masculine initiative is sometimes praised in private and punished in public. And so many men retreat. They withdraw from approaching women, not because they hate women, but because the cost of miscalibration feels too high. Others keep coming, but with anxiety in their posture. They enter relationships already negotiating, already fearful, already seeking guarantees that cannot exist. They are not sovereign, they are managing risk. And a man who lives by management instead of mission becomes a bureaucrat of his own life. The consequence is not just fewer relationships. The more profound result is the erosion of male identity. Men become strangers in their own lives. They wake up and realize their choices are not authored by their values, but by their avoidance. Avoidance of loneliness, avoidance of conflict, avoidance of shame, avoidance of discomfort. They begin living like employees of their own cravings. This is where the poster lines begin to emerge, not as slogans, but as diagnostics. If you cannot hold your center in desire, you will pay for affection with your dignity. A woman does not destroy your purpose. She reveals whether you had one. Every time you over-explain, you announce that your spine is negotiable. If your peace can be bought with attention, someone will always set the price. Aristotle's lens is ruthless because it places responsibility where it belongs. Not in blaming women, not in blaming culture alone, but in the cultivation of virtue. The man who wants long-term respect must become a man of measure. Not moderate in ambition measured in appetite, not lukewarm in love balanced in devotion, not passive governed. Because long-term respect is not preserved by performance, it is maintained by consistency, and consistency is the visible shadow of inner law. Now the practical integration begins, not as a list of tricks, but as a reorientation of how you move. Notice the invisible pattern of emotional kneeling. Most men do it without realizing. They apologize too quickly, they explain too much, they rush to repair any tension, even when they did nothing wrong. They treat her discomfort as an emergency, and in doing so, they teach her that their stability depends on her being pleased. A sovereign man does not panic in tension, he allows discomfort to exist without rushing to erase it. He speaks plainly, "I am not available for that. I disagree. That does not work for me." He does not punish her for reacting. He does not beg her to understand. He stands where he stands. Aristotle would call this temperance and courage combined, the capacity to endure emotional heat without becoming reckless or submissive. Notice the pattern of mission abandonment. Most men believe that love requires reordering everything around the relationship. They begin skipping the gym, dropping hobbies, neglecting friendships, and losing focus at work. They call it prioritizing. But what they are really doing is concentrating their identity into one fragile point, and when that point wobbles, they collapse. A sovereign man keeps his mission central, not as an excuse to neglect love, but as the very condition that makes love healthy. His work, his discipline, his friendships, his physical training, these are not decorations. They are the infrastructure of his psyche. They make him stable, and stability is what allows intimacy to deepen rather than turn into dependence. Aristotle would say the good life is a life of purposeful activity in accordance with virtue. A woman can be part of that life. She cannot be the replacement for it. Notice the pattern of overexposed vulnerability. Most men misunderstand modern therapeutic language and believe that dumping raw emotion is intimacy. They confess their fears, their insecurities, their wounds, not as truth integrated into strength, but as a plea to be saved from themselves. They seek reassurance like oxygen. They ask, "Do you still like me?" in 100 disguised forms. A sovereign man is honest, but he is not helpless. He shares his inner world without making her responsible for it. He can say, "I have struggled with this," and also demonstrate, "And I have a plan." Aristotle would call this practical wisdom, the ability to act rightly, not merely feel deeply. Women can respect pain when it is governed. They cannot respect pain that is used as a bargaining chip for attention. Notice the pattern of comfort addiction. Most men treat comfort as the goal. They want the relationship to feel safe at all times, with the emotional temperature stable and the conflict absent. They avoid difficult conversations. They tolerate disrespect because confronting it feels like risking their comfort. But comfort purchased with self-betrayal becomes a kind of slow death. You will live, but your soul will be hollow. A sovereign man does not worship comfort. He worships truth, responsibility, and the long-term health of the bond. He will risk tension to preserve respect. He will risk loss to maintain dignity. Aristotle would say that the virtuous man chooses the noble over the merely pleasant. This is the entire secret. Spoken plainly, long-term respect is preserved when you decide what is noble, even when it costs you something. Notice the pattern of approval economics. Most men treat a woman's approval as currency, and they go into debt for it. They buy gifts they cannot afford, make promises they cannot keep, and assume personas that are not real. They inflate themselves to be chosen, and then live in fear of being exposed. A sovereign man does not inflate. He does not sell. He reveals. He lives in a way that requires less marketing. He's not trying to be enough by external measures. He's becoming enough by internal standards. Aristotle would call this proper pride, a man who knows his worth and behaves accordingly, without arrogance and without begging. Proper pride is not loud. It is a refusal to demean yourself for access. These are not tips. They are the mechanics of balance. And balance, in Aristotle's sense, is not found by guessing. It is trained. It is practiced until it becomes your default. The same way you train your body in the gym, you train your character in the moments where your impulse wants to lunge toward excess or flee into deficiency. Now the threshold appears, two futures. If you ignore this, you will become a man who lives on emotional credit. You will keep chasing intensity and calling it love. You will keep negotiating against your standards until you no longer remember what they were. You will become more anxious, not less, because each experience will train your nervous system to expect instability. In 5 years, you will be more guarded, but not more sovereign, more suspicious, but not more wise. You will speak about women with bitterness, because bitterness is easier than accountability. In 10 years, you will look back and realize that the relationships did not merely end, they altered your posture. You will have less warmth, less initiative, and less belief in your own agency. You will have learned slowly to live smaller so you can avoid pain, and you will call that peace. If you answer this as initiation, you will become quieter but stronger. You will begin to move as if your attention is valuable, because it is the substance of your life. You will choose relationships that fit your architecture rather than rearrange your architecture to accommodate a relationship. You will speak less to convince and more to clarify. You will feel loneliness at times. Not the dramatic loneliness of rejection, but the sober loneliness of a man who refuses to beg. And that loneliness will refine you. In 5 years, you will have fewer chaotic stories, fewer emotional hangovers, fewer nights staring at a ceiling bargaining with God for a text message. You will have more discipline, more sleep, more strength, and clearer direction. In 10 years, you will have a kind of respect around you that is difficult to describe, because it is not charisma, it is gravity. People will feel that you do not move easily, not because you are rigid, but because you are governed. And women, good women, stable women, will respond differently to you. Not because you are playing games, but because you have become a man whose desire is strong enough to be honest and disciplined enough to be safe. You will not need to demand respect. You will make disrespect expensive by being willing to leave, calmly, without theatrics. You will not threaten. You will not remain where you are not honored. This is the hardest part for men, accepting loss without begging and acknowledging that the price of dignity is sometimes walking away. Aristotle would say that to be virtuous is to be willing to suffer in the short term for the sake of the noble. Most men choose the opposite. They prefer short-term relief and pay with long-term self-contempt. So let the final warning be simple. A man who cannot maintain balance will always lose long-term respect, because imbalance turns love into a transaction and desire into a chain. And here's the mirror line you must not escape. She does not remove your dignity. She reveals how cheaply you were willing to sell it. If this struck something ancient in you, if you felt recognized rather than entertained, keep this work alive. Share it with a man who's quietly losing himself. Subscribe if you want more of this clarity, because the world will not hand you sovereignty. It will sell you distractions until you forget you ever wanted it. Balance is the difference between a man who is loved and a man who is respected.